if your name is tied up within plumbing, it makes it very hard then to add another vertical into that mix. So, you'll see a lot of businesses today that'll kind of have the home service tag applied to them, something along those lines, or ABC group or whatever it might be. So it just kind of leaves that scope a little bit more open for future possibilities. The other thing that you want to probably avoid is personal names. If you've got a business name, which is, Olaf's Plumbing, it's pretty hard to sell that business to someone that isn't called Olaf. Listeners and viewers, welcome back to the Sideshed podcast. In this episode today, I'm going to run you through a topic which I come across all the time, truthfully, with in conversations with businesses that we speak to in relation to naming the organization and naming the business and securing the assets around that. Now, I've actually also created a really useful resource for this, which if you stick around to the end, I'll let you know where that is. However, the reason the conversation I think is worthy of a podcast is because it seems to affect a lot of businesses at a lot of different levels. So we have, many businesses that are sort of, very well established, and they're wanting to either add a product or a service into their ecosystem, or maybe it's a new business that's sort of getting started and they're considering different name options. And I will disclose this as well. I've kind of learned a lot of this through my own faults. And so I'll identify some of those as we move on. But I just want to lay a bit of a groundwork and put a bit of a system in place for you guys when you're out there looking to name a business, and give you some of the stepping stones and the things that you need to consider in the right order when it comes to choosing a name for your business. Now, I will refer largely to a way that we do it here in Australia. However, I will also say pretty much everywhere in the world has a very similar process. The difference would be when we get to the point where you need to register your domains and register your business trading names and things like that. That may vary based on location. So if you circle back to maybe, mid 2000s, it wasn't uncommon for businesses to, and for good reason, I will qualify, to go ahead and name their businesses with these kind of cliche names. And if you go back a little bit further still, coming out of the yellow pages world, and some of you young people are probably thinking, what the hell's a yellow page? But basically, it was a name where a business resource, if you want to call that, like a directory where your business could be listed as the go-to business for whatever, and it was all done in alphabetical order. So you'll sometimes see, and we still see this occasionally, where businesses will have like AAA1, plumbing and gas, or AAA carpentry or whatever. And that kind of goes back to those days. If you're ever wondering why they're doing that, it's that was why. It was like back in the yellow pages day, those businesses would dominate the top of the listings just purely based on the fact that it's alphabetical. And so it was kind of crazy. And anyway, so you move forward a little bit, circa, mid 2000s, as I mentioned, we sort of went into this space where businesses would go ahead and they would start secure, or they'd create these names and they'd secure these assets and domains and things like that around, their service and their location. And you'd be in that scenario where you've got like a plumbing company that would have, 15 different domains, and it's the same company, but they just secure the domains because it would show up in search. And then Google came along with their Penguin update, and they went, let's scrap that idea. We don't want you to have all of these, multiple domains with really shitty authority on it. We want you to have one good business domain, and we want you to build that and use that as a trusted resource for your customers and things like that. So that was back in the day where you would literally see, Plumber Willoughby, Plumber Chatswood, Plumber Artarmon, Plumber Lane Cove, and all these different domains that would all just tie back to the same business. And it was basically like a strategy in order to get your business to show up better in search. Now, the problem with that, of course, is, that's been fixed since then. So it really doesn't hold any value these days. But the problem that when we get to naming a business, one of the issues that you do want to consider is actually that. It's okay, well, I don't want to name a business that I know people are going to be putting in as key search terms to show up for. So if I take, for example, Plumber Chatswood or whatever it might be, sorry if that's your business name, by the way, but there are thousands or hundreds anyway of other businesses out there that are probably running Google ads for Plumber in Chatswood. So it means it's going to be very hard for you to show up in search, even though your name is that. So you need to consider some of these things. And I'll jump into a few more things that you want to consider as well. So I guess, first of all, before we do that, the This is really targeted, I guess, at businesses that are looking at securing more domain names or maybe adding a division to their business or whatever it might be. Some of you guys have this dialed in, some of you don't. Some of you guys may want to consider this as well as part of the conversation, because we still deal quite often with businesses that do have trouble when it comes to search engine marketing. And it's for a lot of the reasons that we're going to uncover in this short episode. The ideal time to do this, what we're talking about here, is before you go all in on branding and marketing and spending money on things like vehicle signage and all that kind of stuff. Like, this is very much like research ground zero sort of conversation here. So please make sure that you do this legwork before you go and start spending money on registering business names and all that kind of thing. And again, at the end of the episode here, you'll be able to get hold of a resource which will talk you through all these things and give you some step-by-step instructions and some tips on what you can do and what you shouldn't do, just to help you guys along the way there. So hang around for that. So the things that we really want to consider when we're naming a business, when we're coming up with a name for our business today, are the following things. Are the domain names available? So a domain name is your www. whatever the business is. And I will add to that as well. And we see this an unbelievable amount of times over at Tradie Web Guys, the marketing agency that we run. You want to make sure, if you're an Australian business or whatever it might be, wherever you're located, that you have a domain that reflects that. So we see quite often a lot of businesses here in Australia who will secure a .com and they'll build assets on that. And it's not the worst. Like, it's not tragic, but the .au and the .com.au domains, and don't get me started on the whole .au thing because it's a complete scam, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. Those domains are really there to help you and help the search engines and the people that are on the search engines identify where you're located. So if you're an Australian business, you want to make sure you have a .com.au or a .au domain. And if you have one, you can secure the other. Make sure that, if you're using a .com business, it's normally reflective of more of a global brand. So to give you an idea, the SiteShed podcast is a global brand. So that's the siteshed.com. Of course, I own all the other domains around that as well. But then if you look at the agency, which is primarily Australian, then it's .com.au. So that just kind of gives you a bit of an idea. The social media handles are important. So with the domains, obviously there's the .au, co.nz and .ca and all these kind of different extensions on a domain which help individuals and search engines and things like that identify where you're located. However, when it comes to social media platforms, let's take Facebook as an example, you don't really have that luxury. So although you can put into the Facebook page an extension like, Drain Doctor Australia or whatever it might be, it's not as easily identifiable as a domain name with that extension. So these are things that you want to consider before you go securing all these things. You want to make sure, before you start securing all these assets and registering all these accounts and things like that, you want to make sure that, first of all, the domain is available. And when you're checking the domain, just check things that are close to it or things that are close in spelling to it, because you want to make sure if people don't know if it's like some sort of, really cool, trendy name or whatever with some unique spelling way, you want to make sure that the actual way it's spelled doesn't lead to, some dodgy site or something along those lines. So check those things. Check the social media handles, just the main ones at least, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, maybe LinkedIn and just things like that. Are there any existing names within your market? So, I would encourage you to go and jump into ASIC. And if you're an Australian business or whatever the equivalent is within your geographical location, go and check that out, which is the business registry, board, and see what business names are around which are close to the one you're trying to secure, because you don't necessarily want to be in that scenario where there's, you go and secure all of these domains and things like that, then you find out the business name itself is not actually available. And truthfully, you'll be very surprised at how close a name can be and what ASIC will actually let you secure. It's pretty bad actually. And a couple of things on that note. There's you can register the business itself, so that'll be your whatever it is proprietary limited. And then you can also register trading names within that business, and so they're names that you're allowed to trade as, but it's not the actual umbrella business, if you want to call it that. So it's a very simple process, and I would do that as like a stage 3 after you've identified that your domain names are available and the social media handles are available. The other thing as well that you probably want to just check is the Google Business Profile listing. The Google Business Profile is the 3-pack listing, which you'll see when you jump into the search engines. which can help you. It's an amazing bit of real estate, super useful for SEO. And what you want to be careful of, and this is another reason why it's good to have the domain name secured to where you're located for the .aus and so on and so forth, because what you don't want to be is in a scenario where there's some dodgy operator in a different market, different country even, and we've seen this quite a number of times, and they might get like a really bad review from a crappy job they've done or something, and they'll accidentally leave it on your page because they're too close, right? So just be careful of that. So it's okay to be unique, right? And, again, I sort of touched on some of those, cliche names that were around back in the 2000s. You see some of them sort of hanging on today, but they're becoming less and less common, thank Christ. But you've got and again, forgive me if this is any one of your names, but I'm sure it's a testament of the time that the business was registered. But, your drain doctors and your drain dentists and your drain surgeons and your all these kind of drain, whatever, like all these different names, right? And like now it just seems so kind of cliche, and they always have these corny little logos and things like that go with it. Times have sort of changed a little bit since then. And it's really what things that you kind of want to avoid within naming a business are the following things. I don't like cliche just altogether. I think it's just corny and kind of it's done and dusted. So you can leave that out of it. I don't think that you have to include the thing you do or something, super clever that relates to that, because realistically, especially when it comes to domain names, like it doesn't really make a difference anymore. Like the actual keywords living in the domain itself don't hold a lot of value these days. It's more the content that lives on the website that holds the value. But don't be too concerned if your name doesn't actually, have those aspects built into it. Now, when you're planning the business, you want to have a kind of understanding of, okay, do we ever wish to expand beyond where we currently are? And if you do, I would be very conscious about leaving out locations, So if you take, for example, Plumber Chatswood or whatever it is I mentioned before, like if somebody is in a neighboring suburb and they need the service, maybe they won't call because they think you only service that other area, right? Likewise, if you ever have any dreams, hopes, or ambitions of maybe one day expanding beyond plumbing, you may also want to leave that out. And so you'll often see today as businesses expand, like part of their strategy through either growth or acquisition or whatever is they might, buy a business, that complements theirs. So let's say they're a plumbing business and they want to acquire or bolt on HVAC to that business. If your name is tied up within plumbing, it makes it very hard then to add another vertical into that mix. So, you'll see a lot of businesses today that'll kind of have the home service tag applied to them, something along those lines, or ABC Group or whatever it might be. So it just kind of leaves that scope a little bit more open for future possibilities. The other thing that you want to probably avoid is personal names. If you've got a business name, which is, Olaf's Plumbing, pretty hard to sell that business to someone that isn't called Olaf looking forward. And sure, you can sell parts of the business, like the databases and things like that. If somebody's, looking at this as, just sort of an all-inclusive turnkey kind of business, these are kind of things that you do want to consider. And of course, there's, lots of scenarios where these, businesses have, like, take the gyms franchise, right? Like, they're huge. So of course there's exceptions. However, general rule of thumb is if you can leave those things out of a name, based on what your plan and your strategy is, then it will most likely avoid a few headaches down the track. So the steps for securing a business in order. Obviously, first thing we would do is go and check the domain names. And you can do that pretty much anywhere. Crazy Daddies, Crazy Domains, GoDaddy, like all these different places. You can check domain availability. If your marketing agency has the capabilities, they can potentially check it for you. I know we do that for our clients. We can do that all through our dashboard and things like that. What you want to do is you want to check again just to make sure that we're completely certain on this, where you're located, the domain extensions that apply to that location. So if you're a New Zealand business, .co.nz, if you're Australian, .au, and just secure those domains. Or sorry, don't secure them yet. So check them, make sure they are available, and if they are, great. Then you jump on a social media and you're going to go and have a look around and see what's available, on the social media front in space of names that are similar to the business. Don't get too disheartened if there is something with exactly the same name. It's pretty hard today to find a completely unique name, so you may have to apply a prefix to that AUS or whatever it might be to the actual name of the page. However, if it is available uniquely, fantastic, good on you. This means that you've done a very good job in being unique and coming up with a name that is unique across the world, around the world. So then you want to make sure that, as I mentioned before, the business name is available. And if it is, in that order, I would go through and I would secure all those. I do the domains first. I do the social media handles, secure the, you could do them all within half an hour, so it's not a big deal, but then you go secure all those things. And then once you have all of those things secured, the business names or the trading name, perhaps if that's what you prefer in this instance, then you pretty much have all the assets and that can protect you from other people, taking in the business name or anything that's close to the name. The one thing that I've probably left out of here, which perhaps is something that you may want to consider looking forward, could be things around copywriting and trading names and things like trademarks and things like that. I wouldn't get I'm not going to get into that too much in this episode. It's a sort of slightly different topic, but if you do have like something that's extremely unique, you may want to trademark that looking forward, which again is not a hard process. It's just a matter of doing the paperwork. So the other thing as well, you can, so when you're coming up with unique names, again, I say to people and businesses, it doesn't always have to be something that's completely obvious. It can be something that is just relevant to you. We've got some clients that have got, just recently, actually, one of them came to us and they were putting a plumbing business together in Perth, and they had a very cliche name concept. And I came back to them and I said, "Listen, this is not going to work for you. You already offer a greater scope beyond plumbing. You already do HVAC. You're talking about doing home services in the future and like building repairs and things like that. Come up with a different name and remove, the cliche name that comes with it." And this is the reason why we jumped on Google and we typed it in, and there's all of this stuff just came up, and it was just like, it would just be so hard to market in that space because there's so much noise there already. So, they came up with a really cool name, which was short and sweet, and short is always better when you think about the domain. There was Fixor Group, which is FIXOR, and then .au is the domain. Like, it's amazing. It's such a good domain. Emails are easy. Domain is easy, all that kind of stuff. And, we've got other clients as well, that do renovations, and they were a plumbing company. And so they had this, this super long, ABC, renovations, blah, 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 whatever it was. And when we and I went back to them with the same information and the same, I suppose, advice, and they came back with this awesome domain, which is like a renovcircle.au. And I was like, that's perfect. There's no one else has it. It doesn't mean anything to anyone else. It's short, it's sweet, it's a great domain. There's all these really cool, and then it doesn't even have to, that includes the reno part of it, of course. We have other clients who's got an awesome name, their renovation business, and it's guitarra.com.au, and it doesn't mean anything to anyone else unless you're Italian, which apparently it means cat. I know that because I Googled it, but like realistically, it's a perfect domain, short, sweet, to the point. So the point is, I suppose, you don't think that you always have to put all the cliche stuff into it. Like, it can be anything that interests you whatsoever. Just come up with something that, is going to be nice and short. People are going to be able to spell. And ideally, it's you're not going to have to compete with a lot of people on the name itself. So to give you an idea here of what I'm talking about, if you have, and I put this example in the document. If you, and tell me you have daughters without telling me you have daughters, right? So just bear with me on this one. But let's say I've got a plumbing business and I've called it Olaf's Plumbing. So again, it's difficult to sell that to anyone that's not called Olaf. I mentioned that before. Arundel Plumbing means, okay, well, we're kind of stuck in Arundel here, and if I ever wanted to operate in areas outside of Arundel, like Northuldra, then I would have to change the name. Kind of confusing. Arundel bathroom renovations. Yeah, okay, cool. But again, it brings that location into it and that service. So if I ever wanted to expand and I'll start offering kitchen renovations, then I'd have to change the name. And if I ever wanted to expand outside of Arundel, then, I'd have to change the name as well. So ideal names which could potentially work in this instance for that business might be Frozen Plumbing, could be Frozen Renovations, the Frozen Group, Frozen Home Services, whatever it might be. And then you can always shorten that as well, especially with the domain. The domain doesn't have to be an exact match of the actual business name. So, if it was Frozen Renovations, you could find a domain which might be Froren, dot whatever Norway's extension is. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, this is all Frozen references. So, yeah, apologies for that. I'm sure a few of you are smiling, understanding what I'm talking about here. So, anyway, the point is, it doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to make a huge amount of sense to anyone but you. It just has to be something that can be spelled and something that is short and sweet. Once you have that name idea, cool, go through, register the domains, register the social handles, register the business name, and then essentially you are off to the races. So look, I hope that was helpful for you guys. I know it was short and sweet. It's a conversation that we see all the time popping up in the agency, and I just thought it was worthy of a podcast and a resource. Now, you can head across and get hold of this resource at the Academy to tradie.wiki/pod. That'll take you straight across to the place where you can get hold of this resource. And actually, every resource which has ever been left behind by any other guest on the show is going to be available through there. We've set this up again. We set this up newly as a place for you guys to come and just get hold of all these cool tools and things that people leave behind. So again, tradie.wiki/pod. Head across to the Academy. You can create an account once and you can get access to everything, and anything that ever gets added in there, you'll get notified looking forward. So yeah, super cool. Anyway, that's all from me. If you like this podcast, give it a like or a subscribe wherever you're watching, listening, so on and so forth. If you're listening to this on audio, we'd love a review. Please head across to Apple iTunes or wherever you consume your podcasts and do that. Otherwise, I'll chat to you in an upcoming episode. Ciao. Hey guys and girls, how would you like all of the value adds left behind from our podcast guest all put together in the one spot? We've pulled every tool together, every template, every resource shared on the show, and we've packed them all into the Tradie Academy. It's free to join and it's built by the team behind the Site Shed and Tradie Web guys. Inside, you'll get marketing tips, business tools, and first access to future resources, all in one simple dashboard. Just head across to tradie.wiki/pod. That's tradie.wiki/pod. The link's in the episode description. And once again, you just log in once and then you're all set. And if you want to get notified of upcoming episodes, hit subscribe or follow.